Um, Today, I would like to introduce you to two of our newest Master Gardener interns. They're both getting close to their certification, which is very exciting. And I will let them introduce themselves in just a minute, but welcome today to Rebecca, Secula, and Evin Morrison. Go ahead, guys.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rebecca Secula, and I am one of the Master Gardener interns, but I'm actually going to be certified today. This is my final aspect of the internship project before I'm finally certified. So I know I'm really excited about that. And I'm, again, a class of 2021. So if you are interested in the program, I would highly recommend it. You can learn more about it on our website if you are a resident of Arlington or Alexandria. And just to let you know, my favorite house plant is a Maranta, specifically my neon prayer plant. And I'm going to go ahead and let Evin introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Evin. I am also an MGNV intern for this year. My foray into houseplants came from growing up in Texas and a love for cactus and succulents. But I've moved around a lot, so re-landscaping rental properties wasn't really an option. So my gardening came inside and turned into a bit of an indoor jungle. My favorite houseplant is a syngonium, which is also known as an arrowhead vine. There's just a lot of variety in the group of that group of plants, and they grow really fast, which can be super rewarding. So we're excited to share all this information with you today.
Thank you so much, Evin. And so I also just want to, again, kind of introduce you to the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia. We are an organization full of great volunteers, and we serve specifically Arlington and Alexandria. We were established in 1985, and we work on promoting public education on environmentally sound gardening through different programs. So you can contact us again through things like our help desk. Maybe you've seen us at plant clinics as well, maybe at farmers markets, for example, where we speak to the public. We also have classes like this one today, and we really hope to see you someday as well at our demonstration gardens if you haven't come by yet already. You can also, again, learn more about this on our website, and we look forward to sharing all of our knowledge on houseplants with you today. And so taking over the first section will be Evin, and I will see you in a little bit.
All right, so you've probably noticed that houseplants have become incredibly popular, especially during the lockdown and people wanting to bring greenery into their homes. But this isn't the first time that it's been trendy to have houseplants. One of the first big explosions of owning houseplants was actually back in the Victorian era with the invention of the Wardian case, which was basically a glass box where people could transport plants from the tropics. So it became kind of a status symbol to have houseplants in your home, especially in Victorian England. Kew Gardens in London opened in 1841, which allowed the public to really go and see tropical plants that maybe they had only been able to see in books, which really piqued people's interests. Then, as trends do, they come and go. And so in the 1970s, late 60s, 70s, there was another boom where people wanted to bring nature into their homes. The 1950s consumerism trends kind of made people want to get back to nature. So there was a rise in environmentalism. People wanted to have greenery in their space. Design magazines started featuring indoor greenery, and making macrame hangers became incredibly popular, which it is now, again, very popular. And the first Earth Day was in 1970, April 22nd, 1970. So recently we have seen another rise in houseplant enthusiasts, which only grew more during the pandemic. The ability to ship and receive exotic plants in the mail from online retailers has made it even more simple to grow our collections and find new species that maybe you've never seen before. This newest surge has also led to a significant spike in prices. So, when we're shopping around, maybe look and see what they cost a few years ago, because inflation has caused plants to spike quite a bit. But today we're mostly going to talk about bringing home a plant for the first time. It is actually very interesting to see down here an estimated 33.1 million US households participated in indoor houseplant gardening in 2019, and that number has only risen in the last 2 years. So maybe many of you are gardening outdoors, and the biggest thing to remember when you're bringing plants inside is that you are basically Mother Nature. You have no help from the sun, the rain, the natural organisms living in the dirt. You have to supplement all of these things to keep your plants happy and healthy. So this is just a few of the things that we're going to be talking about today, starting off with light. So obviously plants need light to grow. And when we're bringing plants into our dark homes, that is going to be the first big hurdle that you have to leap. So this is a great diagram to kind of show you the setup of a normal room, we could say. And before you pick a plant to bring home with you, it's best to survey your space. You can use a compass or a compass app on your phone to figure out which direction your windows are facing. In a space where nothing is blocking the windows, which is difficult. We have neighbors with big houses, trees, but in unobstructed windows, the strongest light is going to be a southern exposure, followed by a western exposure, and then eastern and northern. So this room is a northern exposure window. So you can see where the direct light is. If you're bringing home succulents and cactus, the direct light is going to be much stronger in a southern window than it would be in a northern window. And we're going to break that down in the next section. You can track the way the light moves across your room through the day, which is going to be really important to see where the most exposed areas are and which tend to stay dark, because you can have a ton of light first thing in the morning, but by the afternoon, maybe your neighbor's house or a big tree is blocking that really strong, good afternoon sun that your plants are going to love. Most houseplants will thrive best in bright, indirect, or direct light. The more unobstructed windows you have to grow your plant collection in, the better, but we'll share a few plants that can survive and even thrive in a variety of these light situations. So you also remember, as we go through these plants, these are not concrete rules, and just keep in mind that usually the more light, the better. So for those of you lucky to have south and west facing windows, these are the plants that are going to thrive in those conditions. These are, you could compare them to your outdoor plants that need 8+ hours of sun. Full sun, direct light are the words you're going to see on plant tags. These plants will thrive placed very close to windows where there's unobstructed sunlight throughout the entirety of the day. Many of these plants will be more succulent. They'll have more succulent leaves that help with water storage in those harsher sunlight conditions. So we're talking about succulents, Hoyas, which can also be called wax plants because of the way their leaves feel. Any of these plants will thrive when put outdoors in the summer months, and I actually recommend moving some of these kinds of plants outside in the heat of the summer. They'll appreciate it. Some plants, especially succulents and Hoya, can actually change color when exposed to large amounts of sun. Usually you'll see this as a reddening of the leaves. We call it sun stressing, but although it sounds like you're stressing the plant out, it's actually not harmful to the plant and is actually a very desirable trait to collectors and many of the Hoya varieties. So you can see it on the image there. We have a little pinking. The more sun, those areas will brighten up, turn more pink and a little red. However, you don't want to get sun stressing and sunburn confused. Plants placed really close to glass windows can burn. This will appear more as a browning, burning, crispy look rather than the reddening of the leaves. In this case, you'll just want to move them back from the window a bit, as some glass can actually magnify the sunlight and make it more harsh for your plants. Also, in winter months, it's important that these heat-loving plants are touching the cold, icy glass. So do a sweep of your plants starting around this time of year and make sure that they haven't grown to touch the windows, because they will grow towards the light and stretch towards the sun. And as we go through this, it's also important to remember that common names of plants can often refer to a number of different plants. So if there's something specific you're looking for, it's best to go by the scientific name and also look that up and compare with other images so that you can make sure you're bringing home exactly what you were hoping for. Two more direct light options. These will thrive best in southern exposure or a western window. Like I said earlier, the southern, western windows are going to be your strongest sunlight, the sunlight that is offered more throughout the day as the sun moves across and sets in the west, given that you have an unobstructed window. But given a full day of light in eastern or western exposure, they'll most likely be fine. It's mostly the hours of sunlight that is important. For a lot of these plants, for a lot of plants, you can think of it like as a threshold. So they need a certain amount of light to survive, but given optimal conditions, they'll put on a lot of growth. So keeping plants indoors is never going to be perfect. It's not their environment. We're taking a plant that grew in the tropics and shoving it into our air conditioned and heated homes. But close to perfect light conditions means you may see a ton of growth, or you won't see a ton of growth, but you'll have a happy plant. And also some of these plants like palms and some on the next couple of slides can get really huge. So stunting their growth is not always a bad thing. So moving on, bright indirect light. Many plants at the store, the tags on these plants are going to say they need bright indirect light, but what does that actually mean? It's honestly a very obscure concept. But you can think of it as being window adjacent. These plants can be pulled back a little bit from the windows. These are great plants to decorate bright rooms with because they don't need to be crowded up against your glass windows. They're great on coffee tables, bookshelves, where they're getting light, but they're not actually sitting in the window. So these would be rooms with western exposure, spaces that stay very bright throughout the day. You can read a book in these rooms without having to flip on a light. Many of these plants that we bring home are tropical plants, so it can actually be helpful from a lighting standpoint to think of how a rainforest is organized. We've all seen that rainforest layout mostly in school. And these are the plants that are going to grow really high up in the trees, not quite the top of the canopy, but one level down. So they're getting bright dappled light in between the tree canopies. Some of these plants like orchids and these jungle cacti, which are also your Christmas cactus, Easter cactus, things like that, are actually epiphytic, meaning their roots attach to the trees really high up in the canopy rather than growing in soil, which means they can make really beautiful specimens for wall mounting, which is a very popular craft that you can do. Now for some of our larger specimens, these statement plants can be brought indoors. Fiddle leaf figs have been very popular for quite some time, but they do require much more light than a lot of the online sources and even some plant tags will tell you. So find a nice large window for them to make home. They don't love being moved once they're in place. So it's important to find a place that they're going to like, otherwise they'll drop leaves and throw a temper tantrum. Every time I watch a decorating show, they put these big guys in dark corners, and I always hope that they're plastic because they're just not going to make it. Monstera species, mostly the most common being Monstera deliciosa, there in the middle, require bright light to continue pushing out large leaves with the splits in them. Those are also known as fenestrations. It's what they're very well known for. So a Monstera not getting enough light will still grow, but you're going to see it present with much smaller heart-shaped leaves, and they're not going to have any splits. These guys can get huge, so just buyer beware. If you're ever curious, you can go and check out the botanic gardens and see what these plants look like growing at optimal conditions, because when you buy a 4-inch plant at the store, it looks cute, but it will eventually get very big and might outgrow your space. So philodendrons are a huge trendy plant right now. There's many varieties that you can look at, and on our handout we list quite a few that you can look up. They're also a jungle plant that can be found in a variety of levels in the rainforest, but will thrive best when given bright light. Their leaves will remain large, and they'll grow fairly fast and maintain the interesting coloring that so many of these cultivars of the genus are known for. But placed close to windows, they can tend to burn. When a plant isn't receiving enough light, the speed in which new growth appears will slow down. New leaves will be much smaller than the ones previously growing. And additionally, especially in vining plants, the distance between the leaves or the internodal spacing can increase. So in between leaves, that stem will continue to get longer and longer when it's not receiving enough light, leaving you with a spindly, or what we often call as a leggy plant. So moving further away from the windows, we have medium light. These plants would be happy in an east-facing window or in a room that gets bright light in the morning and ambient light in the afternoon. Going back to the idea of the levels of the rainforest, these plants would be found at a tier lower than the ones we just looked at. They're still getting sun, but there's more coverage above them to protect their foliage. Prayer plants, which include Maranta, Tenanthe, and Calatheas, need high humidity, so they tend to get brown and crispy edges, which we'll talk about in some problems that you might see in your houseplants later. This group is actually interactive, and they do what's called a nictinastic movement. They react to darkness. So the leaves will fold up at night and flatten back out in the day. That's why they're called prayer plants. Their leaves will make the shape of praying hands in the evening. Scindapsus are trailing plants that look great in hanging baskets, or if they're given something to climb, they will actually cling on and grow upwards in a pattern that's called shingling, where the leaves will actually overlap as they grow up. This one was growing on my kitchen cabinet and doing that, but it wasn't getting enough light. So you can see the internodal spacing is these gaps. So if it's getting optimal conditions, the leaves will be right on top of each other and it looks very cool. And they're fast growers in good conditions. Pothos or devil's ivy are tried and true house plants. I think we've probably known someone who's owned them, especially our grandparents. They grow fast and are easy to care for. They can handle a variety of light situations, and they're also easy to propagate. So if a piece breaks off or they're getting a little unruly, which they can because they grow very fast, you can give it a trim. And as long as there's a node, you can put it in water, root it, and create a homing plant. Some more medium light plants, syngoniums are also called arrowhead plants. They can grow as trailing plants when they're mature, but when they're young, they'll appear more upright and bushy. They come in a variety of colors, and it's kind of a fun species to go and look at. We discussed philodendron earlier, but like I said, they're pretty adaptable. So all the green varieties, the ones that don't have colors or variation or variegation in the leaves, are more suited for medium light situations. So while the species does have plants that boast more variegation, colored leaves, those are going to have less chlorophyll in them, meaning they're going to be need more light. So keep an eye on your growth pattern. If a plant isn't growing well, you can just move it to a brighter space. Chinese evergreens or aglaonemas are super common to find at hardware stores and grocery shops. They also come in a variety of colors and patterns. And like with the philodendrons, the all green varieties can withstand lower light because they have more chlorophyll in the leaves, so the plant can continue to grow and support itself with less light. Lighter colors like whites and pinks, which are common in these Chinese evergreens, are beautiful, but they're also more susceptible to burn. So it's a fine balance of giving enough light to live, but not so much that the leaves go crispy. And so the most important thing to remember is that low light is not the same as no light. Most plants are not going to thrive in low light situations, but some plants will survive quite happily. Growth will be much slower and new growth will most likely be much smaller. These plants are ones that grow under protection in the wild, like at the bottom level of the rainforest or in the undergrowth of larger species that protect them from the harshest of conditions. Plants like snake plants, and often called mother-in-law's tongue, and ZZ plants are both originally from Africa and therefore are pretty drought resistant, so they make a good option for a forgetful waterer. Ferns, on the flip side, make great plants for bathrooms because they need a lot of water and humidity. So if your bathroom has a small window, a fern would be a great option. A few more. Peace lilies are a plant we've probably all been gifted or given as a gift, seen in a floral section. They're adaptable and usually pretty easy. They will tend to tell you when they're thirsty by completely flopping over very dramatically. But after a drink, they'll stand right back up and look fine. Getting them to rebloom can be a waiting game. So make sure you like the foliage as much as the flower before you bring one home, because for the most part, you're just going to have a green plant. Cast iron plants or aspidistras were popular in the Victorian times in front of entryways where there was very little light. These are commonly used as landscaping plants. The ones that I own, I actually dug up from my mom's garden back in Texas. So when you're looking for a specimen, they might be in the landscaping section and not with the houseplants. However, they grow slow, so they can be a little bit pricey. And clearly, we are all here because we love plants, but there's no shame in adding some plastic greenery to your darkest corners. The picture you're looking at is a plastic succulent wall hanging in my windowless bathroom. And there's also a deceptively real looking orchid in there, but I'd rather have some green in my space than not at all, even if it is fake. So if you are determined to have houseplants and you have no light or your windows are blocked by buildings and trees, you can always go with a grow light. So that was one of my grow light setups, but when adding supplemental light for your plants, you can either use incandescent or fluorescent lights. There are downsides, pros and cons to both. Incandescent lights can get very hot, so you want to make sure that they are not ever touching your plant because they can burn the plant really easily and very quickly, and they're not very energy efficient. Artificial lights you need to follow these numbers here on the screen. Make sure you have enough lumens. There are specific grow light bulbs that you can purchase at the hardware store, and it's easier just to use those than try and figure out which light bulbs in the light bulb section are going to work. Plants require blue and red light for photosynthesis, but flowering plants also require infrared light. So there's a lot of options to look at for that. One of the easiest ways to just give your plants the light they need is to utilize a full spectrum LED light bulb. These can be installed as actual grow lights, or the light bulbs can be screwed into the lamps you already own. It's important to remember that a lot of plants that we bring into our home are from areas much closer to the equator. So they don't experience the days getting shorter as drastically as we are experiencing right now. So while plants might seem to thrive in the summer, the darker days of winter might lead you to wanting to supplement with some grow lights, even though in the spring and summer, your plants have been fine. So do we have any questions about any of those plants we talked about, or light in general?
Well, we have questions about other plants. May I ask them now?
Of course.
Okay. Someone has a large indoor money plant that gets root rot even though they use a water gauge. Do you have any suggestions for them?
So see, that's one of the tricky ones, because a money plant can be a crassula or a money tree. So we're either talking a succulent or something with more green foliage. But regardless, it sounds like lightening up the soil is probably going to be a better option. Unpotting it, taking off the rot. If you leave rot in the soil, it will just continue to spread. So you're going to want to take it out, remove whatever's rotted, and then add it back into a lighter, fluffier soil mixture, which we are talking about literally right after this. So you'll have some options for that.
Okay, great. Another participant has an asparagus fern that they've grown outdoors in a container and wants to know if it will thrive if they bring it indoors for the winter.
So I take a lot of my plants out in the summer. We have great weather for tropical plants. With an asparagus fern, it's just going to be keeping the humidity high through winter. Obviously, your heater is going to drop the humidity in your house quite a bit. And it might start dropping some of those really delicate needle-like leaves. So keeping it watered, keeping maybe a humidifier near it will probably help. But the name of the game out here, I grew up in Texas, so you could grow plants outside all year round, but it's just making it through the winter so that they can go back outside and enjoy life in spring. Winter's rough out here for houseplants.
Okay. And another question, one of the attendees has a huge jade plant that is dying or died, but they've managed to salvage a few stems, have put them in succulent media and watered them sparingly, but the plant does not seem to be regenerating or thriving. It belonged to a friend and has sort of an emotional attachment. Is there anything you can recommend?
Yeah, so if you're trying to propagate it, which it sounds like you're doing a great job, if it's in the succulent media, um, maybe try a little bit more water. The plant is actually trying to generate a whole new root system. So you can give it a little more water than you would if a plant already had that root system, because it's trying to really get going. Obviously, right now we are going into a dormant period, especially for succulents. So when you're doing succulent propagation, early spring and summer with the heat is definitely helpful. You could put it somewhere on like a radiator where it's going to keep the soil warm, and that'll help encourage some root growth as well.
Okay, thank you. A light question finally. Someone has brought their spider plants or has their spider plants indoors and the leaves appear faded. Is this an issue with light?
It definitely can be a sign of sunburn. It could also be a fertilizing issue. But if it's fading, you could move it away from the light a little further and see if it greens back up. With some of these problems, it's a little bit of a guess and check. So you have to try something and see if it works. And if not, move on to the next potential problem. But yeah, I would move it a little further away from the window and see if it greens up for you.
Okay, question about African violets and should they be watered from the bottom?
I always water my African violets from the bottom. I have seen both. And the biggest thing is just making sure that the water doesn't sit on the leaves. So you can water from the top, but you want to make sure you're watering the base of the plant and not letting water sit on the leaves. It will actually burn the fuzzy leaves of the African violet. So
Okay.
that's why I water from the bottom, just to make sure there's no splash zone situations.
Okay. Someone repotted their peace lily several months ago and drooped as expected, even when well watered. However, it's now been several months and they're still drooping. Any questions? Any suggestions, I mean?
It might be an issue with the soil medium. If it's too wet, you can also have drooping from overwatering. A lot of the overwatering and underwatering problems present in a similar way. And we're going to talk about some of that later on as well.
Okay.
Peace lilies and spathiphyllums like to be more root bound. So it could also be an issue where it was up potted to too large of a pot and it's just struggling because it has too much space, which seems counterproductive, but sometimes that happens.
Okay. Let's see. Someone else has an aloe plant that loses the bottom leaves, although the top leaves are flourishing. And the top kind of falls over. Any recommendations?
So if the top is falling over, as part of that, if it's growing well, could be that it's reaching for the light, which is called exfoliation. So it might need more light than it's getting. So it's stretching up and then it can't support the weight and it's flopping over. All plants are living things. As long as the bottom leaves are the ones dying and it's not the crown of the plant, you should be okay. If it's putting out new growth, that's a good sign that it's healthy. But anytime you have lower leaves or stems dying, you can just trim them off to keep it looking tidy. But I would try maybe giving it a little more light.
Okay. A question, should all indoor plants be watered from the bottom to prevent disease?
We do have a whole section on watering, so we will get to that
Okay.
in a few
I-
minutes.
I think we can move on. Thank you.
Alrighty. So next we're gonna jump into soil. So just like differing light conditions, plants are going to need specific soil conditions to thrive. It sounds like common sense, but ferns and cactus are not going to grow in the same soil. The goal of a good soil mixture is to help maintain the moisture that is most appropriate for the plant that you're potting it in. So these are my actual soil mixtures. I make my own because I am high maintenance, but a normal houseplant or cactus succulent blend can actually do just fine. You're just going to want to keep a closer eye on how the soil is, the moisture, and making sure that everything is draining properly. So some of these recipes I use to ensure a healthy environment for my plants. going through all of these ingredients just to clarify them, because some of them have weird names. Your perlite and vermiculite. You can also use coarse sand. These things are going to increase your drainage. So if a plant doesn't like to have wet feet, doesn't like to be soggy, you can add more perlite, vermiculite, or coarse sand to help water drain through the plant quicker. I use honestly whatever is available at the store at any given moment. Perlite, vermiculite, there's really not a pro to either one. It's whatever you can get your hands on. So for the tropical plants, the coco coir is a good alternative to peat and sphagnum moss. This helps retain moisture for your plants. Orchid bark makes your mix chunky. It increases airflow. It creates pockets for your roots to grow in. And I also use it pretty often as a top dressing on my plants. Not only does it make it prettier than just having dirt, but it also helps maintain moisture in between waterings, kind of like mulching your outdoor garden spaces. Worm castings are quite literally worm waste, but they work as a natural and organic fertilizer. So you can mix them into your soil mixture, and it helps just fertilize longer. And then horticultural charcoal kills bad bacteria in the soil and helps reduce root rot. So that's always a good one, especially if you are prone to overwatering. You can add some horticultural charcoal into your mix, and it will help kill off the bad microbes. And like I said earlier, houseplant and cactus succulent blends from your favorite plant shop are going to work too. Just don't use soil from your backyard. It's tempting if you have, an inch left of a pot to just go dig up some soil and top dress with that, but it's not going to be healthy for your houseplants. So this slide actually goes for all gardening, not just houseplant soil, but we want to encourage people to look for peat-free options. Peatlands store more carbon than all of the world's forests combined. And when we mine peat moss, the carbon is actually released back into the atmosphere. So when left in place, as they should be, peatlands actually lock the carbon in and store it. It can be kind of hard to find peat-free potting soil. The trend is growing as this issue becomes more talked about and people are more aware of it. But you can read the back of a soil bag. The ingredients should be listed on the back. So you want to look for something with coconut coir as a more sustainable option. Or you can make your own using compost or leaf mold from your yard. And there's actually a great Washington Post article about this that we will share in the chat if you are interested in more. So now I'm going to turn things back over to Becca.
Thanks, Evin. Okay, let's see here, just working on, there we go. Okay, so now that we've looked into some soil basics, we can review potting basics as well. Oops, there we go. So one of the questions that we get a lot is, what kind of container should I use? What's going to be best? Well, it really depends on you and your needs. So one of the first types of containers I'm going to review is terracotta and clay pots. They are porous. They do allow airflow between the container and the soil. So this means that the soil will most likely dry out faster, but they're really affordable and they're super easy to find at a lot of garden stores and garden centers. And if they break, they can also be used in other ways. So for example, if you have a piece of a terracotta pot that breaks off, you can actually put it at the bottom of another pot over the drainage hole, and using that as kind of like a way to block the soil from constantly spilling out the bottom of the container. So those are just some ways that you can reuse pieces and be eco-friendly. And then also we have plastic containers. They are an affordable option when you're looking for containers, and they do hold moisture really well. They're not going to be porous like the terracotta or clay, and they are starting to come out with a lot more decorative options. But when it comes to the plastic containers, you're really going to want to make sure that they're sturdy enough to hold whatever type of plant and soil that you need. You're not going to necessarily want to put a big fiddly fig in a plastic pot that, kind of really wiggles and everything. They get quite large. Also, you'll see that most self-watering pots are going to be plastic, so that can help you if you might be a forgetful waterer. Also, plastic pots, like nursery pots, are going to be the most common container that you're probably going to be bringing your house plants in. So if you decide to repot them into something else, you can always sanitize those nursery pots and keep them to start seedlings or to even have your own propagations for cuttings. But you can also just keep them in the plastic pot. If you check the bottom and see that the roots aren't necessarily coming out of the bottom and they're not in need of uppotting, then you can just put them inside a more decorative pot. And then we also have glazed ceramic. This is most likely going to be the most decorative option for your house plants. As they are glazed, you'll see that the interior will maintain moisture again, much easier than a clay or terracotta, as it blocks the airflow. There are a large variety of glazed ceramic pots around, but you will see that the prices will greatly vary. So it really just depends on you and your price point. And then we also have terrarium and glass options. Now, with a terrarium glass system, you won't have any drainage. Most often, glass is going to be used in a closed system like a terrarium, which is a great option for moisture and humidity loving plants like begonias, ferns, or even mosses. They are also really great options for air plants and can add a really great artistic touch to any room. For example, if you have hanging glass orbs. They're also incredibly affordable with a range in different sizes. So now that we've reviewed different types of pots and containers that you can use, I also want to talk about one of the most important aspects of your pot, which is going to be the drainage hole. And so we don't want you to have any drainage hole woes when you are out shopping. And drainage holes can be one of the biggest advantages any new houseplant owner can have. Holes allow for aeration of the soil, as well as letting excess water run through the bottom of the pot. This lessens the chance of any root rot and to avoid overwatering as well. However, not all pots, especially the more decorative ones like glazed ceramic, are going to have a lot of drainage holes. So a great solution, just like we talked about in the last slide, will be to keep your plants in the nursery pot and just use the decorative pots as a catch pot. You can just simply remove the plant and the nursery pot out of that catch pot, water it over the sink, allow everything to drain out the bottom, and then just simply place it back into the decorative pot. This again allows you to assure that there are no wet feet, so your plants won't be just sitting in water because you've accidentally added too much. And it's a way for you to still keep function and style, which of course we all want in all of our rooms. And so while we're talking about the importance of drainage, I think we should definitely discuss hydrological discontinuity, which definitely sounds way more complicated than it actually is. But it really just means please don't put any rocks or pebbles at the bottom of your pots. I'm sure while searching the internet for some watering tips, you may have come across advice to go ahead and throw gravel or pebbles at the bottom of your pot to help improve drainage. Well, hydrological discontinuity actually busts that myth, that piece of advice that you might have seen, because what this means is that when you water your houseplants, these smaller soil particles above that gravel layer are actually going to become completely saturated. So essentially, you're bringing the water table up to basically the roots. So you're going to have all of that water being stored now directly at the root level. This can lead to root rot. So without the gravel, the wettest part of your soil is going to be directly below the roots. So you actually have a healthier plant, which is going to extend its roots down into the soil to reach more water, again, promoting growth, and you'll have a lot healthier leaves and plants to go with it. So now that we know how to create a good foundation for your roots, not adding any soil, we can look at another important aspect of root health when potting, and that's figuring out if your plants are possibly root bound. So when you are looking at your plants, it's a really good idea to also check the top and the bottom of your plants periodically to see if they're root bound. So yes, definitely also checking the top. You may see small roots begin to poke through upwards. If it's becoming really root bound, it's going to start to wrap around that container and actually can start to protrude out of the top. Now that might not happen, and so you may only see it popping out of the bottom. Again, this is where another time where drainage holes can actually be a really big advantage, because you can see if those roots are starting to poke out of the bottom saying, hey, I need some more space in here. And so if so, you definitely want to up pot. But it's also good to periodically check your plants to see if they are starting to wrap around. You can do this by easily gently teasing your plants out of the pot and just getting a really good look at what the root system looks like. Now, if it is definitely root bound, you may also notice that they are draining water way faster than you're used to. This is because there's a higher root to soil ratio now. So the water has nothing to hold on to. It doesn't have soil particles to hold on to. And this will lead your plant to be dry more often, and it won't have time to uptake the water that you're giving it before it drains right out the bottom of the planter. So if your plant is really root bound, you can gently tease the root ball, giving it a chance to spread out. You definitely don't want to tug or pull really in jerky movements. You just want to tease them apart. But if it's an exceptionally tight and dense root ball, you can take a knife and carefully score the bottom, and again, tease that out to free it up to then repot. And so when you are looking to repot or uppot your plants, there are a couple of basic tips and tricks for you to consider. So we do recommend repotting your plants mainly in the spring, if possible. This is when your plants are waking up from their winter dormancy and they're ready to stretch their roots and have a new home if they're starting to get a little snug. It can be a really great yearly habit for you to get into, to check your plants in the spring, to take a peek and see how that root system is looking. Additionally, all plant owners should keep in mind that their houseplants may need to be potted up about once every 12 to 18 months on average. Not only is this a great way to freshen up any of the soil, replenishing the nutrients that your plants have been sucking out of that soil all year, but it's also a great way to promote new growth, and it will allow your plants room to spread their roots, again, especially if they're root bound. So when you are selecting a size for your next pot, a really good rule of thumb is the 2-inch rule. This means that the next pot should not be any more than 2 inches larger than the last. So potting into too large of a container, as Evan mentioned earlier, can cause issues again with that soil to root ratio, and it could be out of balance. So the soil can hold too much water compared to the amount of the plant can realistically take up, again, leading to root rot. And one other tip that I do want to mention here is that there are a few select houseplants that definitely prefer a more snug environment and don't require uppotting as often. So if you've ever wondered why you see fiddle leaf figs or anthuriums in really tiny pots, but again, they're these huge plants, that's why. And so for these plants, you should consider potting them up every 2 years or so. Okay, and do we have any questions regarding any of those topics?
Yes, the first one is, if you're using coir, do you wash it before you use it?
So I have not washed my coir. You do need to rehydrate it. Usually it comes in a block. Evan, have you ever washed yours?
So it depends on where you're buying it from, but yes, coir can have a lot of salt in it. So if you are concerned, there's no reason not to rinse it. because then you will lead to salt buildup in your soil. Personally, again, I haven't had that issue, but I do know for things like carnivorous plants, orchids, things that have really tender root systems, it's always a safe bet to give it a rinse, because it's going to be covered in evaporated salt water, basically.
Okay. Someone asked about the white stuff outside their terracotta pots. They've been told it's salt and not to worry. Is that true?
Yes, I get that all the time. I have some terracotta pots. So that's just coming, it could possibly be coming through, again, your soil, or even if you're using unfiltered tap water, that can sometimes start to build up. I just simply wipe it off with a washcloth. So I haven't had any issues other than that, but that is normal.
Okay. There's a question about someone's mint plant. They say it was flourishing after they transplanted it into a larger pot. Now, though, the leaves have become sparse and smaller, and some stems have lost their leaves altogether. Is this a soil, light, or watering issue, or too large a pot? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It really depends. There's a bunch of questions we could ask. Is it in the exact same spot? What kind of soil did you use? How much larger was the pot? For something as specific as this, I would recommend filling out our 3-in-1, or I think it's called the 3-in-1 form on our website, and sending that into our help desk so we can look a little bit more in depth into that specific issue, because there's a variety of things that could possibly be going into that.
Okay. Someone asked, is one drainage hole sufficient, or do you need more?
One drainage hole should be more than sufficient. Most of my pots only have one drainage hole, and honestly, that's mainly what you're going to see for a lot of pots as well, is mainly one drainage hole, so that should be just fine.
Okay. Someone else asked about white mold on top of soil in the pot.
So we will be going over airflow as well. So mold can be an overwatering issue potentially. It could also be stagnant water that's sitting in your soil without any airflow. So we will be going into that a little bit, and some tips and tricks on how to avoid things like mold and mildew buildup.
But
Okay,
it can also
great.
be a sign of a healthy biome. So if you have,
That
I know
too.
I've had houseplants sprout mushrooms before, where a spore has gotten in there at the shop or in transport somehow. So just scrape it off the top. Obviously, you don't want to look at it. It looks kind of gross, but you can just remove it. But usually that means that you actually have healthy soil. So it's not all bad.
Okay, great. Someone else has a wandering Jew that has crispy leaves. What could be the problem?
So we will be going into a couple of, again, issues that could cause crispy leaves, and we do have a common issue section as well. So I think we could probably, since it's at 10:50, I think we could probably move on and get to some of those basics.
All right, that sounds good.
Thank you. So next part of our presentation is going to be on watering. I will say watering is going to be the biggest question that we receive, and it's going to be, when do I water? Well, starting off as a new plant owner, it's really easy to overlove our plants. We want to give them all the water and nutrition that they could possibly want, but we really need to make sure that we're giving them exactly what they need. So when starting off, we do have 2 recommendations, but I want to really stress here, reading that care card that comes with your plant. Most new house plants will come with a care card that says when to water. For example, when the first inch of soil is wet versus maybe, or I'm sorry, dry versus maybe the first 2 inches. It really just depends on that specific plant, because you really aren't going to want to keep your Christmas cactus and your fern on the exact same watering schedule, because they have 2 different needs. But that being said, you can set a schedule if you are a forgetful waterer, to check every Sunday at noon and check your plants and see how they're doing and water if needed. But again, it's also important to know that even plants in the exact same spot might have different watering requirements based off of the time of the year, or, you know, how much sun has been coming through the window. Is one isn't in a terracotta pot and one is in a glazed pot? All of these can make the difference when it comes to watering. And also the moisture levels can change depending on how much the AC is running versus how much the heat is running. So you can set a schedule, but you should really be checking the soil every time. So relying on a strict watering schedule may mean that your plants are getting, you know, really thirsty before Sunday at noon. So you want to check them at maybe at least twice a week to see how they're doing, and you'll learn your plant's rhythm and schedule as you go. And so it's also a good way to see, hey, this plant usually needs water on Sundays at noon, but it was a really cloudy week, and so there's a lot more moisture in the soil still, so I'm just going to water it in 2 days again. This helps to avoid overwatering. And when you are checking the soil, you have two methods that you can use. One is the finger test. It's the most effective way to check and make watering decisions. Plants are going to droop or curl when they are dry, which is a great visual indicator, but others aren't as responsive. Also, if you continuously let some plants tell you when they need water, this can really stress them out, which leads to a stunt in their growth or even die. And so when you are checking with the finger test, you're just going to want to put your finger in up to the first knuckle, which is about the first inch of soil. And if it comes out dry, you're going to need to water. But if it comes out and it's still wet and you have stuff attached to your finger, then you're going to want to hold off because there's enough moisture in the soil. You can also use a moisture meter. However, this is a lot trickier than using the finger test because moisture meters can be a little bit finicky. And not only that, but you're going to have to do some trial and error to learn what level of moisture is actually the best for your plant. Again, think of the cactus versus the fern. The fern is going to prefer to stay way higher on the moisture meter, but if you kept your cactus on that same level, it's going to surely rot. And so when you're thinking about watering and you've determined exactly when they need to be watered, now you get to think of how should I water? There are two different methods. You have bottom watering and top watering. There's a very big debate about this in the plant community, but the truth is that they both work, honestly. Bottom watering simply means that you set your plant in a tub or plastic container or sink or even your actual shower tub and allow them to wick water up from the bottom. However, if you do decide to bottom water, we personally recommend to set a timer, making sure that you are going back and checking. It should take between 30 minutes to an hour for plants to bottom water to wick it up to the top of the soil, depending again on how large your container is. But you do not want to leave them in this water for hours on end. This again can lead to root rot and be really detrimental to your plants. You can also go ahead and top water as well. It's probably what you think of typically when watering plants. But you want to make sure that it's coming out the bottom. So you don't want to just give it a little bit where you don't see anything coming out of the bottom of that drainage hole, because that means you're not fully saturating your soil. And you really want to make sure all of it is getting moist to support your plant and its needs. So again, one time that we would recommend bottom watering, especially versus top watering, is if your plants are getting really dry. Your soil can be really hard and crusty, even start to pull away from the container. In these cases, bottom watering and allowing it to wick up and fully saturate that medium can make future waterings easier and make it better to rehydrate the soil more often. And so once you figured out your watering schedule and how you want to, you can start to think about what water you can use. You can definitely use collected rainwater. It's very eco-friendly. The only thing that we would recommend, especially if you're using that water for propagation or leaving your watering can sit in your household, is to making sure that there's no mosquito larvae or mosquito eggs in that water. It can potentially hatch in your house, but as long as you're taking precautions to making sure that there aren't any larvae in that water, you can use that super eco-friendly. We do mainly recommend using filtered water as the best option. You can use tap water as well, but since your tap water isn't going to be as filtered, it could contain minerals or salts or other kinds of trace elements that are going to be damaging to your house plants. So a good idea is to fill your watering can the day before you're watering, let it sit on your counter, and it will actually allow it to evaporate off. So that's a great option if you don't have filtered water for your house plants. And the next element that we want to talk about is airflow, temperature, and humidity. So just like you, your houseplants prefer moderate, consistent temperatures in the home. They will tolerate temperature fluctuations, but they do thrive best between 70 and 80 degrees during the day, between 60 to 68 degrees at night. It's also important to note that most flowering houseplants will thrive best in that daytime range, but may prefer an even lower nighttime range between 55 to 60. It allows for a physiological recovery from moisture loss, and it intensifies color and prolongs flower life. But if you don't want to set your nighttime temperatures to a specific temperature just for your flowering plants, that's completely fine, and they will do just fine with average temperatures. But note, if you do have a room that your houseplants are in that is poorly insulated, you should note that excessive temperatures could cause issues like plant death, stunted growth, or spindly appearances. So care should be taken at the height of summer or winter, especially if you're in Alexandria or Arlington, to making sure that your plants aren't going above or below those extremes. And houseplants also thrive with a humid environment. Most of your houseplants, again, are going to be from tropical areas, and the humidity levels in your home will play a large part in their health and growth. And you can see the optimal ranges on the screen depending on type. So cacti and succulent between 0 and 40, but your average houseplant is going to be between 40 and 70%. And terrarium plants, again, like mosses, ferns, begonias, are going to be best above 70. So the average humidity here in Virginia is around 64% outside, but it's not going to be the exact same in your home. So providing additional humidity may be required, especially during those winter months, because without this humidity, just as we were talking about with that Q&A, you may start to experience crispy brown leaves because your plant doesn't have the moisture it needs to have those nice lush tips and leaves. So humidity is going to play a huge role in this. And when you are looking to ensure adequate humidity in your home, we highly recommend purchasing a few temperature and humidity gauges to check the levels around your houseplants. This is especially important because not only can your humidity change from room to room, but it can also change from location to location within the exact same room. So really inexpensive digital gauges are available online, and they're a great addition to your toolkit. And if you do need to add some supplemental humidity, you can do so by misting your plants. Now, you don't want to over mist. You don't want water literally dropping off of the leaves after misting. It should be gentle. And then you can also add them onto a pebble mat filled with water. Now, the level of water on this pebble mat should be below the pebbles, because you don't want your plants with drainage holes to be sitting directly in a pool of water at all times. So what that'll do is that the pebble mat will allow water to evaporate around your plants increasing humidity. And I think one of the easiest ways, if it's within budget, is to purchase a humidifier. It's really helpful in winter months when your heater is running, completely zapping all of the moisture from your rooms, and it can turn off and on automatically to reach the desired moisture level in the room. And then next, you also want to consider airflow. So if you are seeing, again, damaging mold on the soil surface, having airflow can help keep that excess of moisture from building up and from just staying stagnant onto the soil surface. And it can help prevent mildew and reduce disease. Not only this, but having a small fan blowing on your houseplants can also replicate a natural breeze that you would experience outside and help to strengthen your plants as well. And then now that we have all of those basics down, we also want to talk about fertilizer. And so fertilizer, just because you're giving your plants the amount of water it needs, they're also going to be hungry and require some food. So plant food or fertilizers contain 3 major elements that your houseplants require, which is going to be nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. This is called NPK. And the NPK is going to be listed on your packaging of fertilizer or plant food in 3 numbers, like 555. You'll see 5-5-5. This means that's the level of NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that's inside that plant food. Now, most houseplants will do completely fine with an average fertilizer. However, some species will do better with a species-specific or varietal-specific food, such as cacti, succulents, African violets, and fiddle leaf figs. However, you are absolutely going to want to use varietal specific food for orchids and air plants. They must have their specific feed. And we strongly recommend, before you even crack open that fertilizer, to read every single part of the directions for that plant food to make sure that you are feeding the adequate amount. This is not one of those more is better moments. For using too much fertilizer, especially something that you're adding monthly, can potentially burn your plants, can lead to fertilizer burn if you add too much in. So make sure you read every part of the direction there. And when you're, again, using maybe that, that soil recipe that Evin gave, you could add compost or worm castings as an additional way to feed your plants. And when you feed your plants, there's also a better time to start and taper off. So a good rule of thumb is to feed your plants once a month during their growing season. For most plants, this is going to begin in late spring, continuing through the summer and tapering off in the late fall. As the days get shorter and completely ceasing during winter. Because if your plant is not actively growing, it won't uptake or require fertilization. Now, you may notice that your plants might still grow in winter even without fertilizer. If so, that's great. That's no problem at all. Evin and I experienced that with some of our plants this winter, and they were fine and just completely happy and healthy. But you do want to start to pick that back up again in the spring. Okay, so do we have any additional questions for those sections?
Yes, we do. Someone asked, is it okay to use rainwater that comes off the roof, or is that bad for plants?
So it depends on the system. Again, you may have some rain barrel systems that are set up for that, but I would be concerned of anything additional, any kind of bacteria, etc., kind of coming off of the roof and into those barrels for your houseplants. So I think I would recommend against it unless you have a system specifically set up where that's not an issue.
Okay. And this, I think, is from someone trying to conserve water. They wanted to know if they can use bath water that has had Epsom salts in it to water plants?
So I do know a lot of people that use shower water. They leave a bucket in the shower with them and use gray water. I would maybe not use Epsom salt water because
Yeah.
as the water evaporates, the salt is going to be left behind and create a overly salty situation for your plants. It's the same thing with tap water, but obviously just at a much higher salinity level. So normal soaps and things would probably be fine, but I would maybe avoid it if you're using Epsom salts.
Yeah, I would definitely avoid Epsom.
Okay. I've heard people recommend using ice cubes for orchids. Is that something you would recommend?
So actually, that's a pretty big joke in the houseplant community. Orchid people die when you tell them to put an ice cube on your orchid. I know some people have been very successful with it. I tend to water very thoroughly. Don't let your orchids sit in water. Most orchids are growing in either orchid bark or moss. So you just want to make sure that that is moist for the root systems. Putting that kind of cold ice on the roots could potentially burn any exposed roots, and also not give the plant enough water.
Okay. Someone asked, how does a plant know the difference in summer and winter when it's an inside plant?
So I mean, great question, right? You know, they don't have eyes, but they will notice, especially, you know, again, you're going to have less sunlight hours. So even though they might not be right up against a window, it's going to be darker sooner and for longer than you would in the summer. And that's where that rhythm comes in and how it affects your plants. So again, if you want to give them some supplemental light, you can add grow lights to kind of trick them, and they won't know that it's or at least to give them a little bit more of an umph through the winter.
But it is also important. Plants need a dormancy period.
Yeah,
Just like we
absolutely.
need to sleep at night, they need to take a break. If you're forcing your plant to grow 12 months out of the year, your growth isn't going to be as strong and healthy as it would be if it gets to take a break, rejuvenate, and then keep growing in the spring and summer months when it's supposed to be growing.
And it also can help allow for blooms to happen. So a lot of people will say, why isn't my Christmas cactus blooming, or whatever holiday cactus you have? And you know, that can actually be because you're giving it too much light when it's starting to power down. That actually allows it to produce blooms. So everything has its natural cycle and its dormancy periods. That's why it's, again, like Evan said, incredibly important.
Okay. That's it for the questions, but I wanted to tell you about a very nice compliment. Someone who's a master gardener since 1992 says this is the best program she's ever heard on houseplants.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we can go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Evan. She's going to go over a couple of problems and pests, and then we can wrap up with any additional questions.
All right, so now we know how to take care of your plants. You've brought them into your home, and I have the fun job of telling you about all of the problems that you're probably going to experience at some point or other. We're going to start off with pests. So even the best houseplant owners will experience pests at some point. It's not if, but when. And I can guarantee that I've had all 4 of these common pests on some of my plants at one time or another. So don't let these nuisances get you down. It's not the end of the world. So this slide details some of the most common pests you're going to experience and the way that you're going to notice them. I have never experienced spider mites like I did until I moved to DC. They go wild in the winter because the heaters are lower humidity. They don't love humidity. They don't love moisture. So when given that optimal hot, dry climate that we have in our homes in winter, they get excited. The lower humidity levels also stress your plants out. And stressed plants produce a pheromone that attracts all pests, not just spider mites. But that's why you see some of these pests more in the winter than you would in the summer months. Your plants are sending out these signals, and the pests are attracted to them. Spider mites are incredibly tiny, so until you notice, they're very delicate webs, which can also look like dust. It's hard to spot them. A lot of times you're going to see the damage before you see the pests. So the leaves will start to look speckled. These are piercing, sucking insects, so they actually pierce the leaf and suck all the moisture out, leaving behind a dry spot. And there are thousands of them per plant when they really get going. So your leaves are going to probably appear with curled edges. They're going to yellow. And like I said, you're going to notice that webbing in between the nodes and the leaves. Underneath the leaves, if you have a leaf that has a rippled edge, that's a good place to look to see if you have any of this webbing. Dusting your plants sounds tedious, it is, but it's also really going to help not only let sunlight get to the plant, the chlorophyll can be blocked by dust, but it'll also let you know that that's not dust, it's a spider mite web that needs to be dealt with. So if you notice this, you're going to want to take your plant to the sink, take it to a shower. They are hydrophobic, so water will bounce off of the webs. So you really want to get in there with a strong spray of water to break up the webs, wash them off, and then treat them with a neem spray. You can do neem and insecticidal soap back and forth for a week, spraying every couple of days to treat them. These guys float. They catch drafts in your room. And so if you notice spider mites on one plant, there's a decent chance that they have spread to other plants in the general vicinity of that one. So go ahead, check them all, and make sure that you don't have a total breakout. Next up, we have mealybugs. They are also piercing, sucking. They look like little white cottony creatures clung to your plants. They're very slow movers, which means they're really easy to control. If you notice them, you can just dab them with a cotton swab dipped in rubbing alcohol. It will immediately kill them, but you do want to make sure that you get them all off. Again, a little bit of a tedious process, but worth it because they will kill the plant. If you notice them coming back over and over and over, it's important to unpot the plant, see if they're down around the base of the plant or even on the roots where they're breeding and then coming up. Once they come up and stick, they usually don't move after that, but the baby bugs will be crawling around. So you want to make sure that you stop that before it gets crazy. Thrips are incredibly annoying because, like spider mites, they're really small and hard to see. So you usually won't notice them until you see the damage. Again, you want to spray the plant down with water, wash as many of them off as possible, and then treat with something like insecticidal soap. Again, stippled leaves, yellow leaves are going to be a good sign. These are usually on the underside of the leaves rather in the crevices like spider mites. So if you flip it over and you see a really long, skinny bug, very small, you have thrips, and you want to deal with that pretty quickly. Least damaging to your plants, but probably most annoying, are fungus gnats. They are like fruit flies, but they breed in moist soil. If you have houseplants, the likelihood of you bringing these home from a plant shop or a big box store is pretty high. So just be prepared. The best way to control them is to actually get rid of where they breed. So letting the top 2 inches of your soil dry out. They only breed in moist soil. So if it's not damp, they're not going to be breeding. If you do find that you have a ton of them, you can buy yellow sticky traps, which they're attracted to, which will catch the adults. It will not help with whatever is breeding in the soil. You'll have another outbreak. But if you're catching the adults before they're able to breed in the soil, that stops the life cycle as well. To stop them from breeding in the soil, you can use BT, which is mostly bought as a product called mosquito bits. Mosquito dunks. You can either soak the bits or the dunks in water and make a BT brew, kind of like a tea, and water your plants with that. The BT is not harmful to anything but things like mosquitoes and fungus gnats. It's not going to hurt you, your plants, or your pets, or your children. I wouldn't drink it, but it's an organic solution. Some people also mix the mosquito bits into their soil mixtures just to make sure that that is stopping the mosquito gnats in their tracks. So moving on from pests, we have common problems. You're also likely to experience some of these cultural problems with your plants. Some of the most common include chlorosis and crispy edges, which can both easily be remedied. Chlorosis is a pretty common problem in houseplants because they're sitting in basically stagnant soil. And unless we are refreshing the nutrients the plant needs to take up, you'll end up with a chlorotic plant. You're going to notice that the leaves are yellowing. The plant will generally just look kind of sad, but the veining on the leaves is going to stay a bright green. So the best thing to do is to just repot the plant with fresh soil, knock as much of the old soil off, and give it some fertilizer, either a slow release in the soil or stick to a fertilizer routine. The chlorotic leaves will not green back up, but new growth should look much healthier. Crispy edges, we talked a little bit about this, can be caused by a lack of humidity, fertilizer burn, watering with tap water on things like prairie plants and marantas that are a little more susceptible to chlorine and salts that are found in tap water, which can lead to crispy edges. So pruning off the ugly leaves is really the best way to remedy the look of the plant, and then switching over to a filtered water or like an RO water. Your new growth won't have that issue, but you will need to obviously change what's causing the crispy leaves so that it doesn't keep happening. The most common problem is that houseplant owners experience are under and overwatering, and this happens with new and experienced houseplant owners. Some of you will be helicopter parents to your plants and want to water them all the time. Restrain yourselves. Others, like me, will test the limits of your houseplants and sometimes accidentally create a drought scenario. Regardless, no one is going to be a perfect waterer all of the time. But the real kicker is that some of the telltale signs of overwatered and underwatered houseplants are exactly the same. So you're going to have to dig a little deeper than just looking at the plant to figure out what's going on. Underwatered plants obviously will dry out, but their dead roots. So when plants don't have enough water, the roots will die back. And basically when you rewater the plant, those dead roots will rot away. They basically become compost in the soil. Too much of this will lead to root rot. So it's important to keep your plants well watered and on off of that cycle of too dry and too wet, too dry and too wet, because you'll end up with root rot even with an underwatered plant. Overwatered plants also can appear to droop. They can yellow. This is where you'll get those fungus gnat infestations. Basically, if you know that you're an overwaterer, it's a good rule of thumb to add some of those extra drainage supplements to the soil mixtures we talked about earlier. That way you can feel like you're watering your plant enough, but it's not going to be holding on to that moisture. It'll run off. Again, overwatered plants can also yellow. Severely overwatered plants will rot. The stems can rot. The crown of the plant can rot. And for cacti and succulents, it's most likely that the whole plant will rot and your cactus will basically just deflate into a ball of mush, which is always sad and a little gross. So sticking to a watering routine is obviously the best way to keep any of these from happening. And reading your care instructions, as Becca mentioned earlier, before you bring a plant home is always very helpful. So, do we have any questions on pests and common problems?
We have one question about whether you should dust plant leaves with a wet cloth or a dry cloth.
Honestly, I use a microfiber cloth. It just catches more dust, but a damp cloth is fine. It's not going to, I mean, it shouldn't be soaking, but just a damp cloth to catch more dust is fine. I've heard people dusting with milk. I've heard people dusting with leaf shine. but just a damp cloth with a little water, it will be just fine.
Okay, another questioner has scale on her gardenia that she keeps treating with the alcohol and cotton swabs and they come back. She's unable to check the roots because the plant is too large. Any suggestions?
So you could use something like a horticultural oil. You want to make sure that when you're using an oil product like that, even sometimes insecticidal soap, that it's not in direct sunlight because it can magnify sun rays and burn the plant. But it will actually, especially the horticultural oil, will smother the scale and it won't be able to breathe, basically. So if picking them off by hand is honestly the best option, but if they keep coming back, you can try one of those other products.
Okay, that actually takes care of it for the questions, but I have to say, I have never seen so many compliments for a great presentation as have been put in the chat today. You guys will have to check it out. It's really nice.
Oh, well, thank you. And
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for showing up, and hopefully we answered as many questions as you have and lead you on to have a successful houseplant journey. If you do have any other questions, very specific questions, you can contact our help desk. Becca mentioned it earlier, but the contact info is here. That way you can send in pictures and really get to the bottom of what's happening with your specific issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we hope that this was incredibly informative for you today, and you just run outside and go and buy as many houseplants as you can. So thank you so much for attending, for your questions, and we hope to see you again soon.
Well, I want to thank Rebecca and Evan. My goodness, you guys are making the class of 2021 look awesome. It's so exciting to see what even our interns can, bring to the table with hard work and their own knowledge. So thank you for just being such a great representative of the program.